Hey guys, welcome back to another Spy Family Sunday. Today I'm here to talk about Spy Family chapter 121. And man, this was a long chapter, a lot of stuff happened. I'm going to try to summarize a good chunk of it, otherwise this is going to be a really long video. Great chapter. I love the direction it's going. Let's go ahead and get into it. If you like the content here, please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Definitely leave me a comment. I'm very active in the comments. So this chapter starts off with Fiona and Loid, and they are looking over Melinda's file. Melinda skipped her appointment with Loid because she's seeking therapy, and Fiona's like, well, if her test results came back, I guess that puts an end to the theory that Donovan is an alien. And Loid is sort of like, of course he's not an alien. Like, don't be ridiculous. And Fiona's like, oh, I was just trying to make like a joke. She's like thinking that to herself. Fiona's like, with all the stuff going on with Melinda, I mean, how is this going to help us with the war plans that Donovan has? And Loid is like, any little bit of information we can get is a positive. And so Fiona's like, okay, then what about the Imperial Scholar route? We get a funny panel of Anya sneezing, the gag where somebody talks about you and then like you sneeze. And so she's sneezing. We then cut to another panel of bowling balls, and Yor's like winding up for the swing, and then she like just torpedoes a bowling ball into some pins. They go everywhere. The end of the alley is just like demolished. And she's like, yeah, I got one of those little striky things. Is that correct? And all of the other women at the gathering are sort of just like flabbergasted. They're like, yeah, the lane's been destroyed. And Melinda's like, oh, you're so much fun. But, let's try not to, break all of the pins next time. And of course, Yor's a little bit embarrassed by that. All of the women sort of go their separate ways, and Yor is like, hey, before you go, you had mentioned that you were having trouble sleeping. I have some tea that'll really help you. Melinda appreciates the gift, but she's like, I'm really not allowed to accept gifts, especially edible gifts from people from the outside. And Yor's like, oh yeah, you're a very important person, I can understand that. Melinda sort of downplays that. She's like, oh please, I'm not that important. Yor sort of like swallows the dry leaves and like chokes on it, and she's like, I swear to you, like, it's not poison. And Melinda's like, hey, are you free after this? And so they're being driven somewhere. Melinda's like, hey, I never thanked you for the fare. Or apologized. She's like, the truth is I've been seeing your husband for treatment. And Yor's surprised by that. She's like, you have? And she's like, Loid didn't say anything. For some reason, Yor is thinking to herself, like, are you getting hit? When I read that in the panel, I was like, that seems like such a drastic place to take it. I mean, I know domestic violence is like a real thing. It just, for the context of the conversation, it was just a little jarring. And so Melinda goes on to explain, it's patient-doctor confidentiality. And so Melinda's sort of in a thoughtful space, and she's like, I really appreciate your husband like trying to help me through these issues. I can tell that he's really trying to get to know me. He seems like a wonderful man. But even so, she's basically saying that she feels like it's really hard for her to open up because she feels like, at some point like Loid would be seeing like straight through her, but she's actually thinking about Donovan. And you get like this really creepy panel of just his eyes, and they're so like just deadpan and like sunken in. I mean, I can understand like why that would be scary. I mean, Donovan's face is scary. Like, her husband is scary. So I understand like why Melinda feels the way she does. And like, she specifically says like, at some point in your life, you sort of get tired of everybody looking in on you from like the outside. So like being in the public view, being a celebrity, the prime minister's wife, yada yada. I think that's really what Melinda's suffering from. You know what I'm saying? She doesn't really know like who she is standing next to her husband, who is a public figure. So I guess she's sort of afraid of people like seeing who she really is, and Yor can relate to that. She's like, it scares me too, the thought of somebody really knowing who I am. And that resonates with Melinda. She's like, what? You feel that way too? Like, are you afraid of your husband knowing? And Yor is very honest. She's like, yeah, maybe that's just a fear that wives, Melinda's like, I'm so happy to hear that you feel that way. And she was like, are you still free? I have something that might interest you. you. And then, like, y'all, this is where the chapter gets a little nuts, like, for real. We move on to this panel and we get, like, all of these people sitting in a circle, Melinda and Yor included, and they're wearing, like, these really goofy, like, white hats with these, like, antennas pointing upwards. Yeah, it feels very cultish, very occultish, which it is. And so they're sitting in a circle, and this guy with this like rectangular hair is like, I guess he's like the leader, and he's like, now let us begin, everybody link hands, and like we'll, you know, close our eyes and we'll seek harmony with the universe. And Yor's kind of like, what in the hell is going on? And she's like, what is this hat for? She's sort of like, you know, you can just tell that she's uncomfortable. And Melinda's like all smiles, and she's like, oh, relax, Yor, like it's cool, like this will be fun. The other people are kind of like, you know, who is this person? Like, this is not just a hobby. You know, he's like, the leader guy is sort of just like, you know, I take this very, very seriously as I guess he's a psychic or something. He can reach into the universe to like interpret messages, you know, psychics and mediums and all that kind of stuff. And he's like, I take my profession like very seriously. And his name is Dr. Crowley, which is cool if you remember in the arc where Anya was being introduced to a bunch of the kids that she's going to be in classes with. One of the boys had the exact same hairstyle as this man, so we can only assume that this is his father, which is really cool. It's a nice tie-in, so it's like father, like son. So they're all just sort of sitting around this typewriter like with a candle, and they're going to communicate like with the universe. And Melinda wants Yor to communicate with the universe to like tell it her problems and like what she's, you know, like what she's going through right now. You know, obviously Yor's like, okay, I can't tell them that I'm secretly an assassin, and it'd be really weird if I told them that I fall in love with my husband. So she's thinking of like just anything else that she can talk about. And so she starts talking about like pudding and whether or not she should lick the last little bit of it off of the top of the lid. And everybody in the group is like, who the hell cares about that? You know, and so everybody's sort of thinking like, what a weird question, like what is going on? And Melinda's like, oh, I totally understand you, Yor. And everybody's like, you've got to be joking me. Like, everybody seriously looks so annoyed and like they're giving crazy side eye. And so they're going through the reading, and Mr. Crawley is like, you know, typing on the typewriter, and he gets an answer that comes back. You know, he just gets a bunch of random things like rustling forest, a room with drawn curtains, smoke, tempered teacups, just a bunch of stuff that like doesn't make sense. And even to himself, he's like, what am I saying? Like, why am I even pretending to do this reading? Some of the other people are like, that doesn't really sound like a good omen. And Melinda, surprisingly, is the only one to defend it. She's like, have you guys forgotten about the food shortages after the end of the war? And so obviously Melinda has gone through some stuff, like with the end of the war and the fact that there is a severe food shortage. So for her, like, all of this makes sense, and it's something that needs to be respected. And Melinda sort of says, I think, you know, there could have been a more favorable interpretation. And Crowley is like, are you trying to say that I was mistaken? And so, you know, they're sort of having a tit for tat, and that sort of wraps up the session. Melinda's driver's like, oh, miss, you're out early today. And she's like, it wasn't that much fun today. She says that she got a bit touchy about the topic. Like, it's really funny how, it's very interesting, I feel like, how Melinda's almost like protective of Yor. I mean, their relationship has gotten intense in such a short amount of time, and I really like that. It's cool. She goes on to encourage Yor, and she's like, you know, I'm certain your husband will accept you. Like, you and all of your lid-licking truth. And Yor's like, oh, Melinda. And she's like, I do use a spoon. And so they're talking and having small talk and, you know, just pleasantries before they leave. And then we get this really sort of haunting panel of Melinda's eyes, and she's sort of like looking down, but you can't tell what she's thinking about, which I really like. Melinda is hard to read. I feel like her poker face is just next level. And so before they leave, Melinda hands Yor the notebook that she was supposed to give to Loid during their session. And I was like, oh my God, like, what kind of information is in here? So she gives her this important document, and Yor's like, yeah, I will definitely make sure to give this to my husband. And then we flash to a panel where she's getting home, and she hands this over to Loid, who is completely surprised. You know, he's getting some vital information here. Loid is reading through the notebook, and he's very much surprised that Yor's relationship with Melinda seems to be growing at such a fast rate. And so reading through all of this, I'm just going to summarize this. So Melinda is basically saying that, you know, after my husband fell ill, once he recovered, it seemed like he was a different man. Fell ill, we don't know what that means, but he fell ill in some kind of hospital. And when he recovered enough, she's saying that he felt like a different person. You know, he became short-tempered, foul-tempered. Melinda's basically saying that, like, I hadn't told my husband about this, but then he knew about it, you know, and it's like, am I being monitored? ? And then, you know, she would go on to say, like, the dates are hazy, but, you know, that's all I could really remember about our conversations. Was it around the time that my husband resigned as prime minister, you know, at the ministerial residence maybe? And then she mentions somebody that we've already been introduced to. She mentions a Professor Othen, and she was going to go meet this man, but then she got scared because she was met with a harsh expression that made her fearful. And I'm like, well, it couldn't have been was it from Professor Othen or was it from her husband? Like, that part sort of confused me. So I guess she was going to go see this man, and then she decided not to out of fear. The last panel of the chapter are the grandparents, you know, Professor Othen. And, you know, Loid just has like this flabbergasted look on his face, like, oh, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out, like, because the professor, he's a master at linguistics, right? What was Melinda's ties to Professor Othen? Why didn't Donovan want Melinda going to see this man? Like, is Professor Othen part of Project Apple? Like, who is this old man? So I feel like, I guess we're going into another Desmond arc, which is great. I mean, the more time we spend with the Desmonds, like, the better. And I'm guessing next chapter, Loid is going to go visit his neighbors and try to extract some information out of them when it pertains to Melinda. Like, all of the stuff is starting to tie together, and I think it's really cool. If we get a flashback with Professor Othen when he was young, and we see, like, what he was doing, like, I think, oh my God, you guys, I cannot wait until we get flashback chapters to the war, and we find out what exactly happened to Donovan. Of course, it didn't go unnoticed by me. I truly believe that he can read minds. He can read minds like Anya. So I think whatever happened in Project Apple happened to Anya, and it happened to Donovan. Who was the person that did this to them? Who knows? I mean, maybe it was Professor Othen. We have no idea. But I truly believe that Donovan has the same power as Anya. He can read minds. And as soon as that's further confirmed, oh my God, it's going to make Loid's job so much harder. Like, imagine Loid trying to get the upper hand on him to get information, and dude's reading your mind the whole time. Like, it's going to be crazy. So I'm very excited to see where this is going. I don't mind going into another Desmond arc. I mean, we need to know information about this family. There's too many secrets. What happened with the war, you know, Melinda suffering from like memory loss or something that's going on. So I think it's going to be really good. So yeah, those are my thoughts on chapter 121, The Spy Family. Thank you again for listening. And until next time, remember to be awesome and stay true.